What are you seeing in Washington? Are the Republicans really seriously approaching the question of, hey, not only should we audit what we already sent, but we should, end what we're planning to send? What's your take?
It's mixed. Remember that, like most people's governments, we have the best government money can buy. And large numbers of people on the Hill benefit enormously in terms of campaign contributions from doing the bidding of their donors. Those donors want war with Russia. They think that harming Russia is a good thing and that somehow or another we benefit from it. I obviously think that's nonsense and don't support it, but that's the feeling. And I don't see that ebbing dramatically. Now, you said by July. Well, maybe that's true. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm not even sure that the Kiev regime and this state called Ukraine will be around by July. I just don't know. I think Burns is also been trying to tell them to do things differently on the ground, as have many of our military advisors. And they have not, or only taken some of the advice and not most of it. It's a very hard-headed group, I mean, Ukrainians are tough people, and I understand what they're trying to do. Unfortunately, I think it's a bad cause in the wrong place. But I think Burns was probably as truthful as he could be, and I do think the Ukrainians need to be concerned about that. But the problem is that when you tell them that, they tend to do stupid things. Let's sacrifice another 5 or 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers in order to show people that we're alive, kicking and well, and can win. That's not really the answer. They should be building reserves right now and falling back, frankly, to more defensible terrain. But if you're going to maintain the fiction that within a year they're going to launch offensives to regain control of Crimea, which, I think is absurd to even suggest such a thing, but that's being floated, and people in Washington still believe that's possible, then I guess you do what you do.
I want to pull up a quote. Łukasz, if we can pull up the tweet. Yes. So Michael Tracy commented on this, that addressing a Chamber of Commerce meeting in Boca Raton today, this is a few days ago, Zelensky thanks BlackRock, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and others for their support of Ukraine. Adds that sending Ukraine heavier weapons like Abrams tanks represents a big business opportunity for U.S. corporations. Doug, you know very well the quote by Smedley Butler, who said that war is a racket. He even wrote a book entitled War is a Racket. Yeah. What's your comment when you see this blatant admission from Zelensky that, it's really coming to a point where you throw away the talk about democracy, freedom, and let's just make some money?
Well, the first thing I would tell people is that if you look at the heads of those firms, whether it's BlackRock or Goldman Sachs and these other things, they're many of the same people that brought on this disaster in 2008, the financial crisis. And tragically, we made a terrible mistake. We bailed everyone out, with very few exceptions, at 100% on the dollar. But in fact, at the time, many other more prudent financial analysts said we should bail them out at 10 cents on the dollar, because many of these firms deserve to go out of existence, because they have in fact created the crisis that we're living through that has ruined so many lives in the United States. I think we're on the road to a financial economic Pearl Harbor in this country. I don't know when it's going to strike. Jeremy Grantham, who's a very well-known analyst, said that the S&P, Standard & Poor, is going to lose 50% of its value over the next few months. If we end up in a confrontation just beyond the border, Polish border with the Russians, I would see that happening in the space of 2 or 3 days. That would be worse than anything we saw in 1929. So nobody is thinking right now about all these implications. Greed seems to be the overriding consideration, and Zelensky is appealing to the greed. Now, we could waste a lot of time talking about Zelensky's checkered past and all the various people in his, some people would say criminal syndicate in Kiev that are squirreling away money in Cyprus banks and elsewhere. I don't know. And we've seen this recent firing of all of these alleged corrupt officials that have always been there, who are likely to be replaced by more corrupt officials. And somebody said, well, that's because the Americans are taking over the government. Look, the place is the 51st state now in financial terms. We own it. We own the government. We own the whole mess. I think this is all about saving face in Washington. People in Washington do sense that this is not going to work out. What they don't know is what to do about it. How do they escape accountability from this? Now, many of them assume that Americans will be as they have been in the past, complacent, and simply say, oh, well, that didn't work, move on. The problem is that people in the United States are beginning to suffer from the economic conditions. So I think they're a little worried that they're not going to escape from this. So to go back to your original point about what happens in July, depends an awful lot on what happens here with the American people and how bad things get. And it would be a mistake to disconnect what's happening in Ukraine with what's happening here, because it does have a financial, economic, and most important, psychological impact. And in most cases, people behave the way they do for reasons that don't necessarily follow logic. So, in that sense, I think there are reasons for the people to be worried over in Kyiv that they may be left in the middle of the lake without any more oars in the water. But again, I can't predict with absolute certainty. And I'm troubled by the fact that I continue to see a lot more American military equipment and soldiers arrive in Poland than elsewhere.